The aroma of sizzling garlic butter and freshly baked bread filled the Gilded Spoon, a notoriously exclusive restaurant nestled in the heart of the city. Tonight, the atmosphere was a low hum of polite conversation, the clinking of silverware, and the soft strains of a jazz quartet. Every table was occupied by the city's elite, politicians, prominent business owners, and notably, a large contingent of high-ranking police officials. At a corner table, Police Chief Robert Maxwell, a man whose career had been built on a carefully cultivated image of integrity, was laughing boisterously with his inner circle, enjoying a celebratory dinner. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors swung open, and a woman stepped inside. She was tall, with an elegant, commanding presence that seemed to quiet the room without a single word. Her tailored charcoal suit was sharp, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek, no-nonsense bun, and her eyes, dark and intelligent, swept across the opulent dining room with an almost clinical assessment. She was black, and her arrival in this predominantly white, affluent space caused a subtle ripple of discomfort. Officer Mark Harrison, a burly man with a perpetually suspicious gaze and a reputation for being quick to judgment, was seated near the entrance. He watched the woman with immediate distrust. He'd seen her type before, or so he thought. Someone who didn't belong. Someone who was probably looking for trouble. His hand instinctively went to the small of his back, where his off-duty weapon rested. The maître d', a man accustomed to discerning the social standing of his clientele with a single glance, approached the woman. "Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation?" he asked, a hint of polite skepticism in his voice. "No reservation," the woman replied, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the restaurant's ambient noise. "I'm here for Police Chief Maxwell." A few heads turned. Chief Maxwell Midlove paused, his smile faltering. He scanned the room, his brow furrowed. He didn't recognize her. Officer Harrison, however, saw his cue. He pushed back his chair, the scrape echoing loudly, and stood, his posture aggressive. "Hold on a minute," he interjected, his voice gruff. "Who are you, and what business do you have with the chief?" His tone was accusatory, immediately implying wrongdoing. The woman turned her gaze to Harrison, her expression unreadable. "My business is with the chief, and it is official. I am Agent Eleanor Vance." She reached into her inner jacket pocket, her movements slow and deliberate, designed to convey control, not threat. Harrison, however, saw only what he wanted to see. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he barked, his voice rising, drawing more attention. "Don't you dare reach for anything. You're acting suspiciously. You're a threat." His words hung in the air, raw and inflammatory. The jazz music faltered. Conversation ceased. Every eye in the Gilded Spoon was now fixed on the scene. Chief Maxwell's face, initially confused, began to show signs of irritation, then alarm. He knew Harrison's temper, his propensity for overreaction, especially with black individuals. "Officer Harrison, stand down," Chief Maxwell called out, his voice sharp, trying to de-escalate the situation before it spiraled further. He knew the optics of a uniformed officer confronting a black woman in a public place were terrible, but Harrison, fueled by his own prejudice and a misguided sense of authority, ignored his chief. He took another step towards Agent Vance, his hand now fully on his holstered weapon. "I said, hands where I can see them. Now, you're making a scene. You're a threat to this establishment and these officers." Agent Vance's eyes, which had been calm, now held a flicker of something cold and dangerous. "Officer," she said, her voice dropping to a low, steely tone that commanded attention, "I am a federal agent, and you are interfering with an official investigation. Stand down immediately, or you will be charged with obstruction." Harrison scoffed. "Federal agent, right? And I'm the president's. Show me some ID, lady." His hand moved, and with a sickening click, his service pistol was drawn, pointed directly at Agent Vance's chest. A collective gasp swept through the restaurant. Wind shrieked. Men pushed back their chairs, some reaching for their phones, others ducking for cover. Chief Maxwell, his face ashen, shot to his feet. "Harrison, put the gun down, now." Agent Vance, however, did not flinch. Her composure was absolute, her eyes fixed on Harrison, held a chilling intensity. "You have just committed a federal offense, officer. You have drawn a weapon on a federal agent. Your career and your freedom are now forfeit." Before Harrison could even process her words, before he could utter another racial slur, the heavy doors of the Gilded Spoon burst open again. This time, it wasn't a single person. Two more figures in sharp suits, their faces grim, entered, followed by a dozen armed U.S. Marshals, their tactical gear and serious demeanor a stark contrast to the restaurant's elegant decor. They moved with silent, practiced efficiency, fanning out, securing the exits, their weapons held at the ready. The lead marshal, a tall, imposing woman with a no-nonsense expression, walked directly towards Agent Vance. Agent Vance, perimeter secured, ready for extraction. Agent Vance nodded, then turned her gaze back to Officer Harrison, who stood frozen, his pistol still pointed, his face a mask of dawning horror and disbelief. His eyes darted from Agent Vance to the marshals, then to Chief Maxwell, who looked utterly "Officer Mark Harrison," Agent Vance stated, her voice resonating with authority that left no room for doubt. "You are under arrest for aggravated assault on a federal officer, obstruction of justice, and reckless endangerment. Put your weapon on the table." Slowly, Harrison's hand trembled. His eyes were wide with fear, the bravado completely gone. He, slowly, reluctantly, placed his pistol on a nearby table. Two marshals immediately moved in, cuffing him, their movements swift and decisive. He offered no resistance, his spirit broken. Then, Agent Vance turned her attention to Chief Robert Maxwell. The chief, who had been watching the scene unfold with growing dread, now looked like a man who had seen a ghost. "Chief Robert Maxwell," Agent Vance announced, her voice echoing through the stunned silence of the restaurant. "You are under arrest. You are being charged with multiple counts of corruption, including embezzlement of public funds, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The rest of her words were lost in the eruption of chaos that followed. Gasps, shouts, the clatter of chairs. Chief Maxwell's face went from ashen to a sickly green. He tried to speak, but no words came out. He was quickly surrounded by marshals, his hands cuffed behind his back. The scene was surreal. The city's top cop, the man who had preached law and order, was being led out in handcuffs, his dinner companions looking on in stunned disbelief. Officer Harrison, still reeling, was also escorted out, his earlier arrogance replaced by utter devastation. As Agent Vance walked out of the Gilded Spoon, the jazz music slowly, tentatively resumed, but the evening was irrevocably shattered. The city would wake up to a scandal that would rock its foundations. The investigation into Chief Maxwell had been a long, meticulous, and highly secretive operation, spearheaded by the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, with Agent Eleanor Vance as the lead investigator. For months, she and her team had been building a case, piecing together a complex web of illicit dealings, kickbacks, and cover-ups that reached deep into the city's police department and local government. They knew Maxwell was untouchable through conventional means. His network of influence was too vast, his political connections too strong. They needed a direct, undeniable confrontation, a public spectacle that would leave no room for doubt or denial. The funeral of Sergeant Cully, a man known for his integrity, was a calculated risk. Agent Vance had received intelligence that Chief Maxwell would be attending a private dinner at the Gilded Spoon immediately after the service, a gathering of his most trusted and complicit inner circle. It was the perfect opportunity to strike, to expose him in front of his peers, to send a clear message. The timing, the location, even the choice of Agent Vance herself, a black woman, knowing the likely reaction from officers like Harrison, had been meticulously planned. They had anticipated a reaction, perhaps even a confrontation, but Harrison's blatant racism and his drawing of a weapon had exceeded their expectations, providing irrefutable evidence of the toxic culture they were there to dismantle. The fallout was immediate and widespread. The news cycle exploded. Chief arrested at dinner. Officer pulls gun on federal agent. Corruption scandal rocks City Hall. The cell phone videos, once a source of terror, became viral evidence, played on repeat across every news channel and social media platform. The public, long suspicious of the police department's inner workings, erupted in a mixture of outrage and a grim satisfaction that justice was finally being served. Officer Mark Harrison's career was over irrevocably. He was charged with multiple felonies, including assault with a deadly weapon on a federal officer, a charge that carried a mandatory minimum sentence. His defense, based on mistaken identity and fear for his safety, crumbled under the weight of the video evidence and Agent Vance's.com precise testimony. His history of racial profiling, once dismissed as mere complaints, now became a damning pattern of behavior, meticulously presented by the prosecution. The jury, comprised of a diverse cross-section of the community, saw through his flimsy excuses. He was found guilty on all counts. His sentence a harsh reminder that prejudice, when combined with power, could lead to a lifetime behind bars. He would spend the rest of his days rotting in prison, his name a byword for racist abuse of authority. Chief Robert Maxwell's trial was even more sensational. The evidence, painstakingly gathered by Agent Vance's team, painted a picture of systemic corruption, of public funds diverted to private accounts, of favors exchanged for illicit gains, and of a police department riddled with cronyism and intimidation. Former subordinates, once terrified into silence, now came forward. Emboldened by Maxwell's fall from grace, eager to expose the truth, the city council, facing a furious electorate, launched its own independent investigation, uncovering even more layers of deceit. Maxwell, stripped of his power and his carefully constructed facade, was exposed as a common criminal. He was found guilty on all counts, sentenced to a lengthy prison term, effectively a life sentence given his age. Agent Eleanor Vance became a national figure, a symbol of unwavering justice and integrity. She handled the sudden media attention with the same quiet strength and professionalism she brought to her investigations. She spoke eloquently about the importance of accountability, the need to root out corruption wherever it festered, and the ongoing fight for true equality within all institutions. Her calm demeanor in the face of Harrison's aggression, her unwavering focus on justice, earned her widespread admiration. The city, reeling from the scandal, embarked on a painful but necessary journey of reform. A new police chief was appointed, a woman committed to transparency, community policing, and dismantling the old guard. New training programs were implemented, independent oversight committees were established, and a concerted effort was made to rebuild trust with the communities that had been most harmed by the department's corruption and prejudice. It was a long, arduous process, but the seeds of change had been sown. Years later, Agent Vance, now a highly respected section chief within the FBI, occasionally found herself reflecting on that night at the Gilded Spoon. She remembered the smell of garlic, the jazz music, the sudden, terrifying click of Harrison's gun. She remembered the fear in the eyes of the diners, and the cold, hard resolve in her own heart. It was a moment that had defined her career, a moment where the lines between prejudice and justice had been drawn in stark relief. She thought of Officer Harrison rotting in prison, a victim of his own hatred, and she thought of Chief Maxwell, his empire crumbled, his legacy one of shame. She knew the fight against corruption and prejudice was far from over. But that night, in a fancy restaurant, a black woman had been called a threat and had, in fact, been there to dismantle a corrupt system, proving that true power lay not in a badge or a gun, but in the unwavering pursuit of justice. And that, she knew, was a story worth telling, a battle worth fighting every single day.